Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes Podcast.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I'm Albert Berg, and today we are joined by another podcast. They're relatively new, but they break down comic books, and we are talking about a comic book movie today. So welcome with me, Kevin and Sobe from the Comic Noobs Podcast.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Woo!
I think this is the first time we've actually got video for a guest. Everybody's just like, no, not going to do that. Just
assuming that it all works, Tony.
Yeah.
We have a whole hour to get through of this with no technical difficulties, so do not jinx us in the first 30 seconds.
knock on some wood over there.
Mortem Post had like a really cool like mouth effect going on when she was on there with you guys. That was really cool.
Yeah, that was all Al.
I've had to work with no video before, and I try to find interesting visual representations of the people who are on if I don't get the visual, but I'm always happy to have you guys, people recording, and this is our first time talking, like, I guess not in person isn't the right word, but not over text, interacting live.
The horror thing, like Kevin did.
Yeah,
that's
I sat
true.
in on that.
I remember that. I was kind of in a daze that night, though, so...
Yeah, that's true. It was odd circumstances. This is the first time we've talked to Sobe as well, because I haven't actually talked to you on Twitter yet.
Yeah,
on Twitter. All right.
Mostly because I don't have Twitter, but that could be changing.
We're getting him back online soon, so...
Yeah.
Listen, you're not missing it that much.
I know.
I'm all in favor of the, like, do what you want to with social media. Like, I enjoy tweeting. I freaking hate Facebook, so I deleted my Facebook. I'm just like, no, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the stupid people on here.
I don't have like really any social media. I do have a Twitter, but it's basically just used for my own.
He's a lurker. He spies on my Twitter.
Basically.
It's kind of a cool spot to be in, like, especially when you can ambush somebody after not tweeting for a year and a half.
Right?
But the movie we are talking about today is Blade, which, if you did not know, is based on a Marvel comic book property of the same name, which is why we have the Comic Book Noobs on, because they are going to bring sort of some comic book knowledge to our breakdown of the movie. This was my first time seeing this. Did anybody else first time? Or was I the only one?
Both of us over here, we'd never seen it before.
I've seen it on FX a couple times, but I think I changed the channel.
I saw this movie when I was 9, like, in theaters. My dad just dropped me off the theater. He's like, here, go in there. He bought my ticket and walked away. And that movie blew my 9-year-old mind. Like,
I bet it did.
I can imagine.
Whenever I was that age.
I feel like the bloody makeout scene toward the beginning would have really messed up 9-year-old me.
I think I was just a little bit like tripped out by it, but I remember liking like every aspect of that movie. But I also was watching like Terminator 2 almost on a daily basis at like 6 years old.
Oh, what a great movie.
So I'm not the normal person to be talking about with those sorts of movies.
Well, this definitely runs on the rule of cool too, right? Like, while it is rated R and it's not really appropriate for a 9-year-old, it's not exactly a deep narrative.
Yeah.
No.
And it was, aside from, a few F-bombs and a lot of blood, like, it wasn't like, there wasn't anything super messed up happening that would, like, really mess with a kid's head or anything like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, maybe the whole biting people's necks thing.
Sorry, I cut you off. I didn't hear what somebody said.
Oh, I was just commenting on, the whole, biting people's necks and, that could mess somebody else.
Well, yeah, but that's what vampires do. I mean, if you're 9 years old and you don't understand that, then...
Why are you there?
Maybe don't go see Blade.
Maybe not. Maybe just... Maybe. I don't want to tell anybody what to do, but maybe if you're 9-year-olds, just don't see Blade anyway. Not to question Tony's father's parenting skills, but...
My dad had a running joke on us for at least 5 years or so, from the time we were about 3 onward, that we were day vampires. And it upset my sister so much whenever she was really little, because she didn't want to be undead.
Oh, she believed it? It was one of those things where you're like, yes, we are all dead.
Yeah.
You're like, one of those things you say in super seriousness to your kid.
Yeah.
I told my kid yesterday that all the bears went extinct, and that all the bears you see today are animatronics made by Disney.
That sounds so heartbreaking.
Well, he's 3, so he doesn't really care. But I said it. I was proud of myself because I said it in such a straight face. I was like, Yeah, all the bears in the world went extinct in 1873, and all the bears you see today are animatronics built by Disney. It just sounded like the truth coming out of my mouth. I was like, I can't believe it.
That kid's gonna go into like second grade and start explaining that to his teacher, and
some Calvin and Hobbes level trolling.
Yeah,
that's how you grow up to believe that the moon is a hologram. This movie's
right.
interesting.
We're talking about Blade.
Yeah, Blade.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, the interesting thing to me about this movie is that, like, this came out when in early 90s?
98.
98? Really?
Yep.
I didn't realize it was that late. I thought it was earlier in the 90s. Okay.
No, this is the movie that saved comic book movies, really, because it busted out like $200 million at the box office after Batman and Robin just flopped on its face.
Batman and Robin.
Okay, so this movie comes in, it's an R-rated movie based on a comic book story, and it really, I mean, it kind of breaks the mold when you consider, like, every other comic book movie, because you have, first of all, you have an R-rated, like, sort of big-budget comic book movie, and then it's got, like, the heroes and everybody is all African American cast, right? Like, we haven't got back to that yet.
Nope.
Like, we're still dealing with War Machine, like, kind of being, like, off in the background in Iron Man and the Avengers. And maybe we're gonna get Black Panther in, like, 2019. But this groundbreaking thing that totally changed, comic book movies and kind of brought them back from the brink, like, is so far ahead of its time even now.
Yeah, there was one thing I noticed is that they did a good mix of like they had African American, the whole, like, the main cast was African American, and they didn't mention it. Like, that was my favorite part about that, is that they didn't, it wasn't a big deal to them. It was just that's the way it was. And they weren't like, oh, we're doing this, for a reason. No, it was that's just the way it was. And that's it.
That's Blade.
Well, that's true, I guess, but I mean, just the decision that, like, this is the guy we're gonna do. He's a black guy in the comics. That's the comic we're gonna adapt. We're not gonna change it. And I would argue a little bit. They do drop a reference to Uncle Tom.
Yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere too.
It did,
and it didn't get referenced again. But I thought it was really interesting, sort of a thematic standpoint, that you have them like. Sort of making the race analogy between, like, being half vampire and full vampire, and kind of going there. They didn't really go that far, but it's sort of there to read into if you want to. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot more to this. This movie isn't trying to make some giant political statement, and that's part of it.
That's kind of what I was saying. They weren't trying to. They were just saying, hey, there's lots of black people in the world. There's lots of black people in the movie. We're not going to bring it up. It's not a big deal because this is, how we.
Yeah, just an automatically diverse cast.
How did y'all feel?
But yeah, I thought it was I actually really enjoyed it. It's so 90s. It was almost too 90s because it was. But, like, everybody was head to toe black leather all the time, except the big Swedish vampire chick. She was in all white all the whole time.
I think that was Tracy Lords.
Oh yeah,
Tracy Lord was in the very first part of the movie.
Oh,
like she was the vampire that brought the guy into the club. So if you're into porn stars trying to make their acting debut, you can find her on there. The other girl was actually Spanish, and she sounded Swedish and looked Swedish. It was a little bit weird. Like, she hasn't done any acting recently. I was looking her up on IMDb. So.
I was going to say, are you saying that Tracy Lords is not an actor?
She's very dedicated to those things.
She's dedicated to her craft.
Yeah. That is a person who loves her work.
I admire people like that.
Is this where I make the body of work joke? Is this where I say she has a great body of work?
We don't need to make all the jokes. We can save some for next time.
Okay. But it does, I felt like, even though it's sort of very, very 90s and very over the top, it felt, to me, and I was speaking with Rich Alex on Twitter and he kind of disagreed, but I felt like that I mean, the way Wesley Snipes plays Blade has a very, like, a depth to it that makes the character feel just more relatable, at least in this movie. I haven't seen the rest of them, so I don't know if it gets worse or whatever with the over-the-top stuff, but even though it's all leather, all, like, sword fighting and everything's cool, and Blade doesn't really have that much character, Snipes brings a certain gravitas to him. It's kind of like, what's his face? The guy, Vin Diesel, in the Fast and Furious movies, where they're ridiculous, but Vin Diesel's taking that so seriously. He's like, I'm a serious actor. And so...
there's no chill.
Do what?
There's just no chill. Every line is delivered so heavy. I noticed that as well. Yeah, he definitely brings a very serious aspect to it. I gotta say, yes, everybody in the movie did a lot of that too. Like, every line was serious except for Frost and what was his henchman's name? The guy with the beard.
Annoying guy.
Donald Logue.
The guy that kept losing his hand. I can't remember.
The guy whose hands kept getting chopped off like 4 times.
I forget his name, but the
He's
actor.
on that Viking show and a bunch of other ones. He had a sitcom back in the 90s, too.
Yeah, pretty much everybody but him delivered every line real seriously, especially Chris Christopherson. Whistler was like the best in that movie.
Whistler's one of my favorites.
I was so sad when Whistler died.
Does he come back in the sequel, by the way?
He does. He
does? Awesome.
Like, they basically find him and put him in like a vat of blood and convoluted excuse resurrection later. He's back.
Hell yeah.
Okay, because I saw
I may have to watch Blade 2
I
now.
was tuning into Z Nation yesterday, and I saw him, like, at the very end doing something. I was like, did I not understand what happened in that scene? I'm like 98% certain he was supposed to be dead. How is he? I mean, I like the character a lot because he was, Alfred, but like with guns.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a comic book movie, so
yeah, you pretty much have to resurrect somebody if it's a comic book movie. That's like the theme of comic books, is that nobody ever really dies.
Nerd.
Yeah. Have you guys actually read much of the Blade comics? I know you're really knowledgeable on mountains and mountains of comics. That's one of the things I love about your guys' podcast is you're just snapping through so much different stuff. Had you gone into Blade very much?
I've run into him. I haven't read a whole lot of. There's one, the one he originally started, and I read a few issues of it. It's called Tomb of Dracula, and it was decent. It was from the 70s. My favorite one that I ran into him in was the most ridiculous X-Men story arc. It was called Curse of the Mutants. And basically it's, vampires versus X-Men. And the whole thing is so absurd. Like, it's not very good, but it's so absurd that I loved it. At one point, Cyclops tells Dracula to follow his heart. Yeah. It's so ridiculous, but I love it for that reason.
Yeah, we're pretty friendly to that sort of thing on this podcast.
It's interesting to me, like, he exists in the universe with the other characters, right? Like, with the Avengers and the X-Men, in theory at least. I don't.
Wesley Snipes is really pushing to bring back Blade for the next, like, Avengers movie. He wants to play Blade again and, like, just bring him back.
That'd be awesome.
There would be such a...
I fully support that.
How are you going to do that, though? Like, I at a certain point, in the comic book world, you can kind of accept it, but in these movies, because they're trying to kind of be grounded in reality, if you then say, like, oh, by the way, like, there's a ton of vampires out there, and this guy's just been killing them, and y'all didn't know nothing about it up till now...
Okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from on that.
That kind of fits in with the lore of the story about, like, how the vampires are kind of a secret society and they paid off
they
cops
may be
and
a
everything.
Secret society, Tony, but S.H.I.E.L.D. should know about the vampires.
That's true.
Like, Iron Man should know about the vampires. Like, that shouldn't be something that the smartest people in the world are like, what? This guy just was, like, putting spare parts together in a garage just happens to know about the supernatural stuff and we didn't ever hear about it?
I'm pretty sure Tony Stark could care less, though, about vampires.
Yeah, Tony Stark's all about fighting, like, cosmic aliens and giant and robot armadas now.
Yeah, there's nothing a vampire could do to Iron Man unless there's a very, very elaborate trap.
Well, they're pretty strong. Yeah,
but are they strong enough to literally rip the Iron Man suit, like, off of Tony Stark?
I don't know, Tony. I haven't established the rules
we'd have to look into that. There may be like a comic book an in canon answer to that question. I'll have to look that up.
It'd be more likely that they just ambush him while he's drunk at a party.
Yeah, he's just a normal dude. Like, if he can't get to the Iron Man suit, as we saw in 3, I mean, he cobbled some stuff together, but, like, would not be much of a match for full-on vampires.
That's true.
Yeah. He does hang out with Captain America a lot, though, so he's kind of like a built-in bodyguard.
I wouldn't mind seeing... I did hear Wesley Snipes talking about more Blade movies, and I wouldn't mind seeing that, especially since they did drop the plot point in this one that he ages normally. So if you said it...
He doesn't age normally in the comics, though. That's kind of a weird thing.
Nobody ages normally in comic books. I don't know whether or not he, like, in continuity he ages normally, but I mean, there's this weird thing that goes on in comic books. I'm going to use a quick example. In the X-Men, there was a time where Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat, met Franklin Richards, the son of the Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, and at the time she was 13 and he was 7. And now she's an adult and a teacher at the mutant school, and he's still 7. So, yeah, there's not really nobody ages normally in Marvel comics.
The only one that actually has aged normally, and this isn't Marvel, I don't think. I think it's DC, is Constantine. Like Hellblazer, I'm pretty sure he ages normally.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't read a lot of that, but yeah, I have seen him as like a young and an old man, so.
And you've got old Logan, but that's an entirely different, like, storyline.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, for people who aren't familiar with comic books, it's kind of like James Bond, right? Like, James Bond existed back in the 60s, and he exists now. He's not immortal. Like, he's not some weird vampire person, and he hasn't, despite the fact that the actor has changed, in continuity, there isn't a new James Bond. It's still the same James Bond. It's just in a different era. Like, he can go back and be like, oh, right, remember when I had that car back then that wouldn't have made sense for how old Daniel Craig is, but like you just accept that. Oh, okay. Like you just have to let some stuff go. Sometimes you can't pound too hard on this has to make logical sense drum.
Mm-hmm. Especially with James Bond.
Especially with James Bond, yes. And I think that's very similar in how comics work. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but
yeah, no, you're definitely right. And some of the comics, you look back and the characters are the same age now as they were then, and really the art is similar. Like sometimes you look back and you're like, why doesn't anybody have cell phones? Oh, because this was written in 2002. And yeah, but they're the same age and stuff. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to make logical sense.
What would Batman's literal age be right now?
You'd be like 100,
I don't
right?
know.
Or 80.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think he was in the 30s.
Yeah, late 30s, early 40s for like those early detective comics.
Back when he had a gun.
Yeah,
he's how old when the comic starts as well.
Yeah, 20s,
30, 35, something like that.
Yeah.
So he would have literally been born right around the turn of the century if we went by that.
I gotta say,
I think Captain America's birthday is like 1908 or something like that.
That wasn't the first comic book that came out for him, though.
No, that's like his age in continuity.
He's the only one they try to explain. They're like, yeah, he was frozen, and we brought him back. So
they keep retconning when he was brought back too. Like, I think in current continuity he was brought back sometime in like 2005. But they've been writing Captain America stories like at one point he was brought back in the early 60s, and at one point he was brought back in like the early 80s, and they keep changing when he was taken out of the ice.
Speaking of Batman, I think Blade might be my favorite version of Batman. Because he's got the Batcave, he's got Alfred, he's got the tragic backstory with his parents dying, or one parent anyway. Like, the only difference is that he kills people and he has no money. And I love that.
Yeah, he makes his money by stealing people's watches.
That was the best. That line.
Can you imagine how like you could probably get some pretty fancy watches and stuff too. Like you go into a rave of immortal beings who've had who've had centuries to accumulate wealth. You kill a couple hundred of them, then you go clean up all the jewelry on the ground. There's going to be some good stuff in that.
Yeah, as long as the cops don't show up and you can clean all the blood from the sprinklers out.
Yeah.
My only problem with that sort of train of logic a little bit is the way that the movie treats the age of the vampires. Like, they don't... all of the young vampires are implied to actually be younger than all of the old vampires. Like, the actors... So, like, nobody gets turned at age 80, but they're... And I obviously, that's a little bit of a joke in What We Do in the Shadows when they have the 500-year-old vampire who looks like he's about 30, and then he meets the love of his life, and spoilers for What We Do in the Shadows, but, she's 80, and he finally turns her, and he's like, I feel like I'm robbing the grave. Like, we don't necessarily need to go that ridiculous with it, but there's no indication that these people have been around for hundreds of years. Like any
you
of
see
them.
a lot more of that in the second one, where like there's a few more like really ancient desiccated vampires and some different types along that. You also have like a squad of vampires that are actually like the hitmen for the different vampire families. So like the second one goes into a lot more of that sort of detail.
I guess I'm just, I feel like if you've been around for as long as these guys have, you wouldn't still be like that idiot with the long hair who keeps losing his hands. Like, this just, that guy annoyed me so much. I just didn't want to deal with the fact that he...
Well, they needed someone for him to just beat up on. Like, did you enjoy seeing his face be put into a train?
Yeah.
Yes, but you could have done that with a more formidable opponent, and I would have enjoyed it more.
That's true.
Like,
The formidable opponent in the second one is Ron Perlman, so you get to see some awesome stuff there.
I can see Ron Perlman being a vampire with some gravitas. Like somebody who could throw down and actually be creepy.
I feel like his character, Donald Logue's character, I think was, because it's such kind of a serious movie. I think he was just there for that kind of breakup for comic relief in a sense. So it kind of gave us a ridiculous aspect of it, even though it's kind of a ridiculous movie.
Maybe. I didn't really need that. I was fine with the over the top and being serious. And
I thought Frost was comic relief. That guy, man, he was.
It just reminded me of that horrible e-cig commercial that Steven Dorff has, where he's like the most pretentious ass ever. It's about freedom, not about cigarettes.
I have not seen that, but now I really have to look it up. The Frost. God, what a douchebag. That's the only word I can think of. It really did make me hate him. Like, he was a very hateable villain.
Yeah, he also has his contraption in his room where
the bed thing?
The bed pops up and a girl's just laying there ready for him.
It's not even just a girl, like Blade's mom.
Well, the first time it's just a girl. And then the second time it's his mom. But still... Yeah. What does he do with that? Like, what's the point of having the...
Right.
Why
is that girl in there?
A what?
It's supposed to be like a casket.
Yeah, okay.
Why is there a girl in there?
I guess. That's still dumb.
It's still dumb.
Does he have dirt in there from his homeland? I mean, is it under the mattress?
It's under the 1,000 thread count sheets.
I think there was some really cool stuff in this movie. My favorite single moment in this movie was when, I forget what the guy's name is, but the older, his assistant, the Alfred counterpart.
Whistler.
He's filling up the car with gas and, sloshes the gas everywhere and then, lights a cigarette. And it was one of those,
we were both cracking up when that happened.
Well, it was just sort of this guy, it was a great moment of storytelling because without saying anything, this guy doesn't care if he lives or dies.
Yeah, he just gives no shits.
And that, little moments like that can be so powerful in a movie. And I always, even though, again, this is very over the top and stuff, the fact that they put little stuff like that in there, I don't know, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. They did that a few times with Whistler. Like when he spied the girl, he just she was spying on them, and he saw her. He just kind of started hobbling after her. He knew she wasn't getting away, but he was just going. He's like, "Come on, you're gonna try this." It kind of showed that he's with Blade, but he lets Blade all do the heavy stuff. But he's still there doing stuff too, and he's gonna. Even if it's just chase a girl around in a locked room, he's gonna keep doing stuff. So
he immediately grabs the shotgun and everything. He's formidable for being a hobbled old man with cancer.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and I would imagine that's one of the reasons why you bring him back for the sequel, no matter how ridiculous it is. That character, that idea is so cool that you have, that he can pop in and he's sort of there to be the mentor and the assistant and everything. But when things go down, he's got a machine gun and a shotgun, and he can kill. I mean, he's not as good as Blade because he doesn't have the superpowers, but he's right there with him.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you guys know if there's any Whistler comics, since he was killing vampires before Blade was? He was just hunting them down as a human.
Is he even in the comics?
I not that I have seen, and if I have seen him, I might have forgotten him because it would have been a side role and I missed him. He might be a main character in some of the later Blade stuff that I haven't read. Like I said, I haven't read a lot of stuff where Blade is the main character so much as where he's more of a bit player. But yeah, it's possible.
There's one episode of like a Spider-Man crossover from the old Fox series,
from the 90s?
Yeah, from the cartoon. Whistler was in that, so I'm pretty sure he's at least going to be in a lot of those comics.
Well, sometimes those cartoons would invent things, though. I mean, I know for sure that what's her face, Harley Quinn was originally only a character in the cartoon series, and
the Batman animated series.
Who was the X-Men character who they invented?
X-23. She's X-23. She's kind of like a teenage or young woman version of Wolverine. She underwent the same sort of procedure. She's got 2 adamantium claws, but then she's also got 1 on each of her feet.
I thought Jubilee was as well.
No, Jubilee was from the comics.
Okay.
She was in that X-Men animated series, and that was a strange lineup because that lineup never actually existed in the comics. But Jubilee was she was a character in the comics before the show. Right concurrent with the show, though. She didn't come out long before that show started coming.
Do you find it annoying when the comics are like changing things to make it more like the movies?
It depends on what they change, I guess. It depends on what they change. If they make something like really stupid happen because they want to keep it, up to date with the movies, I don't like that. But like they introduced the Chitauri in the comics. Those are the aliens that attacked New York in Avengers, and those were kind of an invention for the movie. And they introduced those into the comics, and that was cool. So yeah, I don't usually mind, but sometimes things get a little bit ridiculous. Especially now, Marvel doesn't own the Fantastic Four, and now all of a sudden there's no more Fantastic Four books, which really kind of pisses me off.
Well, from what I'd read, that wasn't exactly a hot seller to begin with.
Not lately. No, not lately. It wasn't probably one of their biggest ones, but in the 60s, that's the Fantastic Four. That's the one that started the whole Marvel universe. They were the flagship title, probably all through the Silver Age of comics, the 1960s, until X-Men and Spider-Man started getting really, really popular in the 70s.
Really interesting that that they had to invent the Chitauri, because they have the Guardians of the Galaxy, and those guys, I would assume, interact with like all of the alien species in the Marvel universe. Although there is a whole weird rights issue with some of the alien stuff because they belong with the Fantastic Four in the split up. But I guess I didn't realize that they had to invent those guys. I thought that there would have been enough weird stuff out there for them to just pull from and be like, oh yeah, hey, these guys.
Maybe they just want a clean slate to go with for this one.
Yeah, and they kind of had to put somebody with Thanos, because Thanos commands like a lot of badasses, but not really a flying space army. And so they had to give him something. And then, there's a lot of the aliens, but then you don't necessarily want, like, a lot of those aliens are up to their own stuff. So, the Skrulls are these shape-shifting guys. You don't want them necessarily just attacking Earth out of nowhere. And the Kree, you saw them in the Guardians of the Galaxy. They're the blue guys. And, they were already in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. You don't necessarily want to, change something so dramatically to fit in your storyline when you could add something new. That's another thing that they did change, because in the original Guardians of the Galaxy, because it wasn't very popular, and I think Peter Quill was a lot older. And since this younger kind of smartass Peter Quill is kind of a newer invention, and I'm not sure if that happened before or after the movie, but now it's real popular since the movie came out. I have a really
beautiful Guardians of the Galaxy comic that obviously is sort of drawing on popularity of the movie from the cover and everything. Actually, it might be. I don't think it's within my reach. But I haven't finished reading it yet. But it's very much sort of like, yeah, we've got Rocket. Like they have all the main lineup and then Iron Man on the cover, just so you know, like, yes, we have the people from the movie in the Guardians of the Galaxy.
We got it.
Don't worry, guys.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, I've been reading quite a bit more of them in the last year or so. They did a big crossover with the X-Men called The Trial of Jean Grey, and that was a really excellent book, and that got me interested in reading more of that
I wanted to go back to what you said about the Chitauri. and that they are introduced into the comic books now, because one of the things that kind of bother me about the Avengers, not that they fought them and that they killed them, but that they were never treated as anything other than just like bugs. And it kind of, like, I mean, I know they look like bugs, but as a science fiction reader, you come to expect that, hey, everybody has motivation and individuality and stuff like that. And maybe, like, I mean, they make a point to show us in the movie that they're chained to those, war machines that they're driving. They're obviously slaves being forced to invade, but, like, we never dig into, like, okay, that's it, we killed them all. I don't know, like, what's the deal with that?
I'd have to say the reasoning for that is just because they needed somebody that the Avengers could just go full out and not pull any punches with.
It's kind of like how Captain America didn't have any qualms about running at people with a 1911 shooting Nazis and nobody seemed to care.
Yes,
right.
I understand that, but I'm saying, like, usually if you go into the comics, things get delved deeper, and I was just curious if they have any more story for the Chitauri. Are they slaves? Were they forced to invade? I mean, I don't know if it happened exactly like it did in the movie, but, if that storyline was mimicked or mirrored or anything in the comics, like, did they do anything more with them, or is it just like, yep, bunch of mindless bug things, we killed them all, no big deal?
Okay, I'm actually fact-checking myself, and it looks like I was wrong, that they were invented for the original Ultimates series, and they were, because I did not read the Ultimates until recently, so that explains why, and they just have become more popular now. And, it looks like a lot of it is trying to take over Earth.
Everybody wants Earth. Like, there's 8 bazillion other planets in the universe, and somehow everybody wants this one.
Because we're
awesome.
They do. They give some good explanations for that over the years in the Infinity crossover event from I think 2013 or 14. Everybody wanted Earth because Earth had the Avengers, and the Avengers, even though it was only a handful of superpowered people, were able to lead this space war and defeat like the biggest space armada ever. Like using a combination of leadership of these other races' space armies and also using their powers to, like, one person would teleport on board and blow up one of the ships to cause confusion or something. And they actually do give some compelling reasons why everybody wants Earth.
Okay.
But, the Chitauri, as far as I can tell, it does look like they have, like, a leadership and spies, but mostly they're, homicidal space bugs.
Okay. I want them to be people. I want to get into that. I always hate when they pull that punch where they're like, yes, the people you're killing are actually human beings who had childhoods. I mean, they're not human beings, but,
alien beings.
Let's say the Nazi example. Like, nobody ever wants to go into how did they become Nazis? Did they really believe in the ideology? Were they actually,
They were grown in tubes.
And I think that's dangerous because if you in real life even too, if you sort of reduce your enemy to some like mindless, evil killing machine, then you lose the opportunity to understand them.
But you make much more effective soldiers.
Yes, but sometimes fighting is not the only way to win, Tony. But it is if you see them as mindless, evil killing machines.
Kind of like the Stormtroopers?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I've liked that they're delving more into that in the new Star Wars, where they're like, hey, some of the Stormtroopers aren't cool with that.
Starship Troopers.
Luke almost ended up being a Stormtrooper. Like, he wanted to go to the Imperial Academy. Nobody ever talked. I mean, I'm sure somebody, because it's Star Wars, I'm sure people talk about that all the time, but
I'm sure there's tons of essays about that.
It doesn't get explored, and I understand there's a fun in having the simplistic view of the world, that there are evil people and the good people should kill the evil people, and it's okay. But I like to sometimes step back from that. Books like This Book is Full of Spiders is probably one of my favorite examples of this, and I don't want to give too much detail for sake of spoilers, but it really delves into that idea of, oh, hey, the people that you think it's okay to kill because they're monsters,
maybe not necessarily okay to kill them. Yeah, that was a great book. I had a blast reading that. I read that last year, I think. That was a great one. And John dies. Have you read the new one, the Futuristic Violence in Fancy Suits?
No, I didn't know there was a third one. I'm going to buy it.
It's not a sequel, but that's the same writer, David Wong. He just came out with a new one.
I have not, but I think I probably will
really
for Christmas. Treat myself if nobody else treats me. Somebody stuff my stocking.
For those that don't know, the John Dies at the End series is awesome. It's by David Wong. We'll have a link in the episode notes. We've also done both of the books on various episodes. Like, I think if you go back to episode 13, it was whenever we did, this book is full of spiders. We also did the movie that came out, John Dies at the End, which was okay.
Absurd. Again, absurd.
It tried to follow too close to the book, I think.
That one...
The movie did.
That one had absurd source material, too, though, yeah.
That's a hard one to adapt, really.
Yeah.
I could see it being a good sci-fi series or something like that.
Hey, you! Do you like the thing you're listening to right now? Would you like to listen to even more of that thing? Well, boy oh boy do I have a deal for you, because today, if you go to humanechoes.com and click the Become a Member button, you can get exclusive access to our members-only bonus podcast. That's right, an extra podcast. It comes out every other week. It's only available to people who help support the podcast. Click that Become a Member button, and you will have access to that. Once again, that's humaneshows.com and click Become a Member at the top of the screen. You guys are awesome. Did we get any questions today, Tony?
We did. We got a couple, all of them related to comics. So, Stitch Alex asks us, which comic book character story has the worst film adaptation? Which one has the best? Who would you most like to see?
Okay, before we answer this question, I want to lay a ground rule. How are we defining adaptation? Because...
If it directly has a name and it's like Ant-Man.
Well, okay, no, but let's say...
Are we talking live-action movies?
For instance...
Yeah, let's limit it to live-action movies and maybe TV shows like Daredevil and things like that.
I wanted to bring up, for instance, let's say Captain America the Winter Soldier, right? There is a comic book called Captain America the Winter Soldier, and there's a movie called Captain America the Winter Soldier, but from what I'm led to believe, there's not a ton of, direct correlation. They picked some big themes and kind of brought it into but there's almost no, if you want to go with, the best comic book adaptations, you almost have to go to, Watchmen, because that is one of the few where it's just, one-to-one, and even that, they, scrubbed quite a bit of stuff, but he tried to, adapt a comic book.
Yeah, and 30 Days of Night and things like that, so.
Yeah. And, and if we're sticking to live action, because they've definitely done plenty of animated movies that are, shot for shot, panel for panel, the exact
I have a question about that later in a minute,
and even some of the...
Finish answering this question first.
Yeah, okay, so I'd say the worst overall, I have to say Elektra.
Yeah,
I haven't even seen that one.
Yeah, I was excited when I heard there was an Elektra movie, and then I saw the trailer. I was like, oh no.
And it had everything going for it. It has Jennifer Garner,
Yeah, and they actually, the only thing they did right was her costume, but they only had it her using that costume for a very small part of the movie, and the story that they tried to adapt just didn't come across at all. I might also say X-Men 3: The Last Stand, just because they handily destroyed the Dark Phoenix saga, which is one of the iconic stories, and man, they screwed it up so bad.
Yeah.
That movie isn't as bad as Elektra, though. That's just sort of
No, it's not as bad. No, it's not as bad as Elektra.
It's disappointing, and it's not as... It for sure doesn't live up to the other two, but I remember watching it and not thinking, that was just garbage. It was just sort of
Right.
I remember really loving the trailers for that movie. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and actually the fight scenes in that movie were great. I'll stand up for the fight scenes in that movie
Magneto
all day.
Yeah, just watching Kitty Pryde fight Juggernaut and things like that. Those are some awesome
Magneto
sequences.
lifting the Golden Gate Bridge? How cool is that?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
But like, you look at the Daredevil movie that came out, and that movie was basically killed by studio meddling. It was like 45 minutes longer, a much darker story, a lot of different things happening, and they just wanted to turn it into something that it wasn't. Like I've seen like 3 or 4 different things just explaining how much was just ripped out of that movie. Like
I've heard there's a director's cut that's good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've heard there's a director's cut of that movie that's actually really good.
I'd like to see it, although I think that with like the new Netflix series, and I really enjoy the Netflix series,
so
they kind of like they reinvigorated that character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, that was a very interesting, kind of early Daredevil type of thing. It's a bit darker than like the Silver Age Daredevil went, but it kind of took the Silver Age stories of how he got involved with the Kingpin, and it did a decent job adapting the stories in a way that the later comic, in a tone of the later comics, like the Frank Miller and the Brian Michael Bendis runs.
I did have a question, and it's kind of, again, going back to the animated stuff, I don't read hardly any comics at all, but I do occasionally enjoy watching especially DC. DC really nails their animated stuff.
Oh, they kill it, yeah.
But one of the interesting things to me is that it seems like a lot of the stuff that gets adapted, and by proxy, a lot of the stuff that seems really formative to people's idea of these comic book heroes is stuff that's not technically in continuity with you got like Batman Year One, The Killing Joke, The Dark Knight Returns. Like, none of that stuff is main Batman like actually happening
canon
in the Batman continuity, but it's all like those are the stories that everybody's like, that's Batman. So I guess no, I was just gonna say, so what's up with that? I also and I think this probably is technically in continuity, but it's Flash going to a different universe, the Flashpoint Paradox. I really enjoyed that movie, partly because it had Batman with a gun and like Aquaman with giant walking robots things, or whatever those guys were. But yeah. So what is so what's so hard about continuity that it's hard to tell the great stories there?
Well, I mean, there are definitely some great stories in continuity. The nice thing about not having to be in continuity is you can kind of do whatever you want. Like you can, for instance, you said The Killing Joke, you can shoot Barbara Gordon and nobody's like, since it's not in continuity, you don't have to worry about DC editorial telling, no, you can't freaking shoot Barbara Gordon and stuff like that. And the other thing is you get people who don't necessarily want to work they don't want to go on a year-long or a 2-year-long, I'm going to write monthly comics, where they could be like, I'm going to write this graphic novel. And, some of the better writers may not want to work those kind of things. And so they write really good stories as graphic novels. And I think that's one, you mentioned DC, and I think DC does that quite a bit more than Marvel. Marvel likes to work as many of their stories into continuity, even if they have to retcon things or whatever. They have to work stuff into continuity. They like to work in stuff. Wow, I messed that up. They like to work it into the continuity. Do
you, with all the, I know this is has become, I've heard, again, I don't read a lot of comic books, but I talk to or listen to a lot of comic book nerds on different movie talk shows and you guys' shows. How do you guys feel about the sort of recent trend of rebooting stuff more frequently in comics? Like,
I don't think they necessarily are rebooting it as much. What they're doing is renumbering, and so you get another, Uncanny X-Men #1. But really, what they're doing is more like seasons of a TV show. They're not like giving people even though like Marvel currently is starting a whole new series of '1s. It's not like they're giving them new origin stories or anything. They're actually just renumbering and giving it like, okay, this is where this new kind of story starts.
With each other,
but it's still continuing.
Because I guess I was led to believe by some of the other things that was not the case. That they kept like doing sort of Crisis on Infinite Earth kind of things over and over and over, to reset the universe so they could like, well, now we're gonna do this. Now this guy's like has this power or something.
At least with Marvel, that's not the case. With DC, like I said, I don't read a lot of I don't read any of the monthlies. So I couldn't tell you. I do read
Yeah.
a lot of the better stories in the graphic novels, but I don't read a lot of the monthlies.
That was like the new 52 where everything just got completely reset,
right.
for DC.
Mm.
And I think that's part of the reason why I haven't been able to follow comics as closely as I'd like. Like, I follow The Walking Dead, I follow Hellboy, I follow a few other ones where I can just buy, the trade paperback and get, 6 issues at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't afford to follow, the new 52 and find, all these people that I really like, and I just don't have the time for it. That's the main problem. But,
and we really like doing this podcast because it forces us to get to read them, basically.
Into them, yeah.
I don't have time. Well, I got to make time. I got to do the podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies for this show that I would have never seen before, without being kind of forced into watching them. Some I've really liked, and some
I was going to say, sometimes that's worked out better than other times, Tony. But we have expanded our horizons.
Perfect.
Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. We've got a few more questions. Some of them actually related to Blade, if we want to answer those.
Yeah.
Donald Eitvlug, Haiku Fiction DJU on Twitter, asks, who would win in a fight, Blade, Michael Morbius, or Marvel's Dracula? And I'm pretty sure Blade actually beat Marvel's Dracula solo, even though Dracula beat the entire X-Men at one point.
Who's Michael Morbius?
Yeah. He's the living vampire. He's a Spider-Man villain when they weren't allowed to actually make vampires, so he was the living vampire.
So wait, why weren't they allowed to make vampires?
That was the Comics Code Authority. They weren't allowed to make actual vampires, even though they were allowed to use Dracula, but they weren't allowed to invent new vampires. That's also why the character. Insane. That's also why the character Sauron, he feeds on mutant energy, and they were going to make him a mutant vampire, but instead they couldn't have him turn into a bat because that was too much like vampires, so they have him turn into a pteranodon. I'd say Dracula is definitely the most powerful, but by the power of editorial mandate, Blade wins that fight because you got to have the good guy win.
Sometimes the good guy wins sort of by a trick or, I mean... it's sort of like the Batman v Superman thing, right?
Blade is the only one who can survive, who can go through UV and daylight, so he's got that going. Well,
but Dracula can just put on sunscreen.
Yeah.
Apparently, that I felt like going back to the movie, that was a little bit dumb.
Yeah,
that was such a cop out.
That was horrible.
Your mascara's running.
I have no opinion on this, although I feel like Dracula. I don't know. I mean, Dracula got beat by just a dude in the book Dracula. They chased him back to Transylvania and put a stake in his heart. If, what's his name? Van Helsing can do it. I'm pretty sure. Now, okay, I don't know about Marvel's Dracula, obviously. But if he's anything like the book character, he should be relatively easy to kill if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. You gotta have that. You gotta have going prepared. You gotta have the garlic mace.
Yeah.
Well, you also again, hopefully,
just like that whenever she sprayed the coffee, he's like, "Is that garlic?"
Total
hit him or something.
It was an absolute human reaction to that.
Yeah.
What are
spray
you doing?
My breath is gonna smell horrible now.
What's the next question, Tony?
Next question is. Rich Alex actually has the second one. Which set of vampire rules, weaknesses, strength, etc. do you like the most? Blade, Underworld, Twilight, etc. Definitely not Twilight.
Definitely not.
Well, the Twilight vampires are overpowered in a way because they don't have any weaknesses. They don't have to feed on human blood. They don't have weakness to sunlight at all.
And don't a bunch of them have extra powers
they're psychic and can see the future, and they're almost like X-Men. It's like a separate continuity of X-Men where all the X-Men are vampires.
Yeah, the
and they also have
vampires.
other stuff that they can do.
Then you've got weird shows that have the vampires aren't very powerful, like Hemlock Grove.
Oh,
and things like
in the middle of season 2 or season 3 of Hemlock Grove, by the way, it's so freaky.
I haven't seen that show yet. It's on. I haven't seen a Netflix original that I haven't liked yet, so I've got to check that one out. You guys keep talking about it.
I was really skeptical of it, and I kind of enjoy the show. Like, it's not the best Netflix original. Like, if you're comparing it to, like, Narcos or something like that, it's not going to hold up. But it's a pretty
gothic, over-the-top, like, melodrama. Okay? Like, it's very much... You gotta get in the right sort of, like... not ridiculous mindset, but it's not like, we are taking place in the real world. It's like, and it's sort of often this sort of side gothic universe where vampires and werewolves just sort of exist, and I mean, they're still hidden from humanity, but it's very stylistic in how it presents itself, and I just enjoy it immensely. But it's also like not very highbrow, you know. I mean, they're very much about the awesome werewolf transformations.
That's like my kind of show exactly. I'm definitely watching that now.
Well, how many highbrow vampire shows really are there?
Oh, True Blood's pretty highbrow. I'd say I like the True Blood vampire rules the best if we're still on the I mean, they're pretty much just like vampires. They've got that kind of super speed thing going. But yeah, sunlight, no. Silver, no. Like, I don't remember if garlic messes with them or not.
I don't know if garlic was a big thing in that show.
But like they can't come into your house. Yeah, it's just pretty much the classic set, except like done really, really well.
I do enjoy the thing where they can't cross the threshold without being invited. Like, it's such a great device, you know, to have, you know, someone standing at your door and you know that they could kill you, but they can't cross that threshold. Like, I don't know that many shows really have used that much, but if you had, like, you could have a seriously interesting, you know, taking place, or somebody asking to be invited in, like, you know, they could disguise themselves, but you're afraid that if you invite them in, there's a whole Twilight episode about this, about Death, that has to be invited in or whatever, and the lady won't let him in, and there's a guy, like, outside begging with her, like, please, I need to, you know...
Oh, yeah, I remember that
I think you could do a really interesting vampire story just based on that weakness. Just based on that they can't come in unless you invite them, but they're really smart. And they can come up with a way to make you invite them in.
Yeah.
I love with What We Do in the Shadows, when they were trying to get invited into the nightclubs.
You have to... The guy's just like, get out of here, man.
I'm trying to think of the other ones I've liked. Like, 30 Days of Night didn't have that many rules other than they couldn't be in sunlight. And you could kill them with the right weapons. So, like, there wasn't a lot of depth in that world. Like, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer style ones are just, like, wooden stakes and crosses and, like, the more traditional kind. I can't remember if they had to be invited in or not.
It does bring up really interesting questions if you do the sort of classic, like, holy weaknesses. Like, if they're allergic to Catholic stuff, like crucifixes and holy water, then what does that say about, you know, the world and the spirit world? That
was one thing I forgot. I wanted to bring up about Blade is that in Marvel Comics, vampires, holy objects do work as long as you believe in them. So, like, at one point, Kitty Pryde was trying to go into Dracula's tower, and she had a cross, and it wasn't doing anything. But then she was actually Jewish, and she had a Star of David, and that repelled Dracula. So as long as you believe in the religious icon you're using, then it works. And that's, I think at one point, like, Wolverine tried to make his claws into a cross, and Dracula just laughed at him. And they're like, you're an atheist. He's like, you're an atheist. Get out of here.
Well, I just still have the claws, okay? I could cut you up. Questions, Tony?
Dead Space.
Okay.
I think so.
I did want to bring up, this has, before we close out, this news story has nothing to do with vampires as far as I know, but did you guys hear recently about the testing that they've done with hot dogs? When this company tested like 90 different brands of hot dogs?
With the, like, how it's like something percentage of it had human DNA in it?
Yes, like 2% of the hot dogs had human DNA in it.
I had not heard that.
There were some guys at work discussing that. It got pretty raunchy really fast, so I think I'm going to bow out of this conversation. They were like, oh yeah, I'm sure there's human DNA in it. Somebody who's working at a hot dog factory, they're putting their DNA everywhere.
We are a hot dog factory. What are you talking about?
That's funny.
Yeah, I have no idea what to make of that, except that
Unless a lot of people are feeding their pigs humans.
Oh, is it like the Hannibal Lecter thing?
Could just be like really like nasty people who are like have like hair dropping into the hot dogs.
Yeah,
and
hot
stuff.
dogs are already pretty nasty. If you're eating them, you're probably not that concerned about it. Like I wasn't like, well, I'm gonna stop eating hot dogs now.
I feel like my grill beats human DNA.
It was just interesting to me. They didn't like give specifics, like how much human DNA did you find? Like, is it a finger or was it like 2 strands in?
What I heard was that like 60% of hot dogs tested had traces, whatever that means, of human DNA.
Probably small
So
amounts.
Yeah,
there
make
was
what you will
also
of that.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's more the special sauce than actual human.
There was also the sidebar of that was that apparently a bunch of vegetarian hot dogs and sausages had meat in them and human DNA. Like there was a higher incidence of human DNA in the vegetarian hot dogs than there were in the normal meat hot dogs.
See, that's just jackasses like me being like, "Oh yeah, I'll give something to."
Yeah.
That's Can you imagine the guy on the vegetarian hot dog shift? He like sees everybody over there like working with like the pig ears and the the snouts and everything, and he's got like blocks of tofu he has to do. He's like, oh man, having fun over there. And he like goes and grabs an ear, like throws it in, just eat that.
Yeah, screw it.
I also imagine a lot of it is because it uses the same machinery. Like, it's kind of like what happens with bad supplements. Like, if you get supplements from certain companies in China, they don't clean out their machines that well. So there were a bunch of older people that were having severe issues because they were getting straight up anabolic steroids. Like, instead of
what is Grandpa Jack's, Mommy?
That explains Yao Ming.
But I'm guessing that has more to do with why there's traces of meat in like in the vegetarian ones. The human issue is a little bit more of a concerning problem.
Is they didn't clean it out after making the vampire hot dogs.
Yeah.
As long as it's meat, right? Like if I would rather it be like pieces of a person than it be like non-meat objects.
Yes, I think I'm with you on that.
Hurdle, but if it as long as it's not like human brain organs, so you get mad cow or something like that. I mean, it's just
well, right. But what if it was a tooth? Can you imagine biting into a hot dog and finding a human tooth?
Sobe and I both just shivered. I don't know if you can see that on the camera.
My first concern would be, holy shit, I just lost
a
tooth.
Then you're like, wait a minute, I have all mine.
Wait a minute, this isn't my tooth?
My dad yanked his tooth out the other day. Like, he was just bothered by it. He was just sitting there and he's like, it's kind of loose. I don't know what's going on. And he just yanked his tooth out.
By hand?
That's kind of badass.
Yeah, that's really badass, actually.
Like, I got a picture of it. It was just like how, like, my mom was like, are you some sort of idiot? You have a dentist do that. And he was like, why would I have a dentist do it? I can just take some Jack Daniels.
If it's loose enough to come out by hand, he maybe have a point. Like, at that point, what is the dentist going to do? You know, he's just going to reach in there with some forceps.
He's going to charge you with, like, flying.
He's going to get a lot of money from you, is what.
Yeah. It's just crazy how deep the roots go. And so, like, on this particular tooth, it's one of, like, the incisors or something, like, not the main canine, but the one behind.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, it's just a huge tooth. Like, I don't know, it was crazy to see. But it's...
Yeah, I had a couple
Are you, like, I remember my mom yelled at him, are you retarded?
Did he put it underneath his pillow for the tooth fairy?
And then he, like, clonked her over the head and took all our money. Reported her for home invasion.
Oh man,
there's definitely a story in that. Like, everybody's so happy that now the Tooth Fairy can't even get away with giving stuff away.
I want to see that in the writers' arena sometime.
I would not be surprised if we get there someday. We're 110 stories in or something like that.
Yeah,
a lot of stories happening over there. All right, I want you guys to let us know where people can find you.
You can find us on Twitter at Comic Noobs Show and also online at comicnoobs.wordpress.com, which also features a little bit of additional content, and we're going to try and be adding a lot more of that coming up.
Yeah, and actually, well, what's this? Does this air? Or is this going to run today? Or
this will run this coming Friday, so about a week from today.
Okay.
So you guys will be on episode 9, I believe.
Episode.
We should have episode 9 out today, October 31st, actually, and then I think hopefully next Friday we have episode 10 out.
Yeah.
And then also you can find our show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, as well as most podcast apps and SoundCloud.
I really enjoyed the one about
like,
MODOK. I gotta say,
Yeah.
like that. Just,
I was listening to that one and the one before, a little bit before the show. You guys are so much better than we were 10 episodes in. Like, it's almost infuriating. Like, we were so bad back then.
We picked up on it really fast. Like, our first episode was pretty slow, but
first episode was pretty rough.
After that, we've just been having a lot of fun with it, and so and Steve makes us sound so smart. Yeah. Our producer, he edits out a lot of pauses and breaks, and he makes us sound so much better than we actually are.
You also get really cool sound effects.
Yeah, I do like the sound effects that get
also Steve.
Also Steve, he's a master.
Joe, why don't we have sound effects in this show?
Yeah. That's
Mr. Sound Editor person.
He's not going to see his raise.
At least get like some random like blade sounds happening, like him unsheathing things.
Yeah.
Shink, shink, shink.
That black samurai action.
My favorite one is, I think it's in episode 5 where somebody shoots Wolverine in the face and Steve just puts in a ping sound effect. He's great with those.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words and having us on your show. It's been absolutely great.
Well, it's great for us. We don't have to talk as much when we have other people on.
A little less pressure on this Saturday morning. But anyway, thank you guys so much for being on. We've got a few things to cover real quick. What I want you guys to do is to go to humanechoes.com. There's a few things on that site to look for. First off, we love our subscribers. Our subscribers are awesome, and they get extra content. If you click on the button on the right-hand side of the site, you can sign up for $2, $5, $10, $20, or if you're a magnificent Octoshark, you can sign up for $1,000 a month. Haven't had anybody take us up on that yet. I wonder why. Anyway. We also have a lot of other cool stuff going on. We've got our store there. We've got our Amazon affiliate link. If you click on that and buy something through Amazon, it doesn't cost you anything extra. It's a great way to support the show. We also have a bunch of T-shirts that are out now. We've got 5 different shirts that are available through TeePublic. You get all sorts of colors, all sorts of cool designs, so go ahead and check that out.
And I ordered my shirt just the other day, and it hopefully will be here for the next podcast that we do. So I'm looking forward to wearing the No Spoilers shirt. And the Magnificent Octoshark. That Octoshark, I would never have believed that anything that cool would come out of that stupid conversation, Tony. But that is one of my favorite things that has come out of this podcast is Brantley drawing and then Jen sort of cleaning up that design for the Octoshark. And now it's on a t-shirt, and I am pumped for that. I cannot wait to wear that on my body.
Same here.
Can I say real quick, I recently subscribed to Human Echoes, and I absolutely love you guys' bonus podcasts.
We love doing it,
awesome.
man. I cannot stress enough how much fun that is doing, and we've gotten a ton of feedback from people that they really enjoy them, so we're glad that you guys enjoy them. We love doing it, and it's really a great way to help us keep going. We love providing that extra stuff for you guys, and yeah, our subscribers are the best. It's amazing.
Woohoo!
We didn't think of a movie for next week, so
we have no idea.
Pay attention to Twitter, and we'll figure it out. So thank you guys again for being on. You guys make sure you check out the Comic Noobs show. It's fantastic, and follow those guys on Twitter. Just all that good stuff. So thank you very much for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.